Hi there, I'm Delphine. My sister told me not to come to Easter because I'm just a mechanic. But that wasn't the part that broke me. The worst part? They used my name to win a scholarship, stole my credit to fund wine nights and flights, and smiled through it all like nothing was wrong. They made me the outsider, then used my silence to rewrite the story without me. You ever feel like the people who should protect you are the ones quietly tearing you down? Yeah, same here. So I froze her credit card. But that was just the beginning. It was a quiet Thursday evening, and Lexington had just started to feel like spring again. The scent of cut grass still hung faintly in the air as I locked up the garage, wiping my hands on the rag tucked in my back pocket. The last oil change had taken longer than expected. Customer talked too much, the bolts were rusted, and my mind wasn't really in it. But that didn't bother me. I liked the silence that came when the shop doors finally rolled down. No clanking tools, no hum of engines, just peace. I'd been thinking about Easter all day. It was less than 2 weeks away, and every year I brought my homemade pecan pie to brunch at my mom's place. It was my thing. Even Travis, my sister Marjorie's boyfriend, had complimented it last year, twice, and that man looked like he survived on kale and smugness, so that meant something. I was halfway to my truck when my phone buzzed in my jacket. I expected a parts supplier or maybe one of the guys asking about schedules, but it was from Mom. Hey honey, maybe skip Easter this year. It'll be a smaller gathering. No emojis, no love you, just that. I stared at the message for longer than I should have, thumb hovering. Surely she meant something else. Maybe they were traveling. Maybe Grandma wasn't up for it this year. Or maybe I was being replaced. I didn't text back. Instead, I slid into the driver's seat and sat there, keys unmoved in the ignition, until the streetlights blinked on around me. Back home, I kicked off my boots and dropped my keys on the counter, the kitchen half lit by the soft overhead light I always forgot to change. I pulled out my phone again, opened the family group chat. Easter brunch planning. I had muted it months ago because they argued about the most absurd things. Do lilies look too funeral? Should we match napkins to table runners? But I always stayed in it. Only this time I wasn't in it. The group name was the same, but my name, Delphine, wasn't listed among the members. I scrolled up. There it was. 3 days ago, a message about the new group being smaller and easier to manage. There were photos of table settings, a pinned note with approved color schemes, and even a dress code. Elegant spring formal. I scrolled until I saw Marjorie's comment. We want to keep it elevated this year. I almost laughed. Elevated? We used to eat ham out of a foil tray and argue about who forgot to bring rolls. Now we're elevated? The ache in my chest built slowly. I wasn't crying, but something cracked, like a pipe under too much pressure. Silent, but impossible to ignore. I called Mom. She picked up on the second ring. Oh, Delphine, hi. I got straight to it. Did I do something? A pause, just long enough to be noticed. No, of course not, sweetheart. It's just, this year is more formal. You know, Travis's parents will be there and they're a bit traditional. I rubbed my temple. Mom, I've been to every Easter brunch since I was 12. She sighed. It's nothing personal. We just thought maybe you'd be more comfortable not coming, that's all. Comfortable, I repeated. You know how these things go, she added, her voice syrupy. It's just easier when everything aligns. Aligns. Like me not being there made the image cleaner. Before I could reply, she said, if you do come, maybe wear something a little more refined, like a dress, not the coveralls. I let that sit in the silence. She filled the gap. You know how first impressions are. I didn't answer. We said our goodbyes, hollow and clipped, and I ended the call with a strange buzzing in my ears. I'd spent the last 6 years building my own business from nothing. Sweat, scraped knuckles, late nights under trucks when everyone else was asleep. And somehow, that made me less worthy of a chair at their table. It was almost midnight when I walked into my kitchen and pulled open the recipe folder on my tablet. The pecan pie recipe sat there, bookmarked for the last 5 years. I stared at it for a long time. Last Easter, I'd arrived early. The AC had gone out, and no one else knew what to do. I fixed it in 15 minutes so Grandma wouldn't melt in her Sunday blouse. No one even asked how I knew how. They just assumed I would. That's what I was to them. Useful. Quiet. Out of the way. I held down the delete icon on the recipe. Confirm delete? Yes. I shut off the lights and stood in the dark kitchen, hand resting on the counter. It was just a pie, just a brunch, just a text, but it felt like a final cut. Like they had finally said out loud what they'd been whispering behind closed doors. Not one of us. I picked up my phone, turned off the screen, and whispered into the dark, "Noted. I won't show up where I'm not wanted." The next evening, I found myself driving across town with a small red toolbox rattling on the passenger seat. I'd borrowed it from Dad last month to fix a bent hinge on the back gate and hadn't gotten around to returning it. No one had asked for it back, but after that message from Mom, it felt like the kind of thing they'd use to say I didn't respect their home, so I figured I'd beat them to the punch. It was just after 6. The light outside had turned golden and sharp, cutting shadows across the porch as I climbed the steps. Their front door was open, the screen door closed but unlocked. I heard clinking dishes inside and the soft hum of a kitchen radio. I stepped in quietly, setting the toolbox down by the shoe rack. "Hello?" I called out, just loud enough to announce myself. No one answered. Then I heard voices, low and clear, coming from the kitchen. "I'm just saying," Marjorie's voice floated around the hallway. "If she's there, it's going to change the whole tone." A beat passed. Then Mom answered, gentler but laced with something else. "We want to keep it simple this year, clean. You know how Travis's folks are." Marjorie exhaled through her teeth. "She's a mechanic, Mom. It's embarrassing. I mean, what's she even going to wear?" Mom chuckled lightly, as if that sealed it. I stood frozen by the coat hooks, heart thudding loud enough I was sure they'd hear. Embarrassing. The word landed harder than expected. Not hurtful like a slap. Worse. Dismissive. Casual. They didn't know I was there. And I didn't wait for them to find out. I backed out as silently as I could, eased the door shut behind me, and walked briskly to my truck. My hands were cold when I gripped the steering wheel. The drive back was a blur. Red lights, radio static, headlights too bright. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, it was already dark. I made myself tea I didn't really want, and while the water boiled, I kept hearing that word in my head. Embarrassing. I sat at the kitchen table, the one with the chipped corner I kept meaning to fix, and stared at nothing. It wasn't like I hadn't felt it before, that slow slide into the background whenever Marjorie had company, the awkward half-smiles when Travis talked about careers. But this? This wasn't subtle. This was deliberate. I thought back to last year, to her birthday dinner at the Italian place downtown. Travis had leaned over the candlelit table and asked, "So what do you do exactly, Delphine?" I'd opened my mouth to answer, but Marjorie jumped in. "Oh, she's into automotive stuff, kind of freelance. She's got a lot going on." I remember nodding, smiling even, like it didn't matter, like I hadn't just rebuilt a transmission that week and signed a lease on my second bay. I let her do that, blur me into something vague, palatable. That was on me. I finished my tea and opened Instagram, half out of habit. Marjorie had posted a photo the day before, a brunch spread with quiche, mimosas, her and Travis sitting with Mom and Dad. The caption read, "Always grateful for family." I wasn't in it. Not just physically. I wasn't tagged, mentioned, anything. Even Grandma's neighbor had commented, "Where's Delphine? Miss seeing her." No one replied. Scrolling down, I noticed older photos where I had been tagged were now just gone. The birthday dinner? The 4th of July cookout where I brought the giant flag cake. Christmas morning when I fixed the garbage disposal before brunch. Deleted, or maybe just hidden. It felt surgical, like being snipped out of a scrapbook page with those fancy scissors Marjorie used to collect. I stared at the screen until it blurred, then shut my phone off and stood. There was no reason to cry over this. Not really. No one died. No one yelled. This wasn't some dramatic betrayal. It was just slow, quiet erasure. Later that night, I pulled out my old leather-bound notebook from the drawer next to my bed. I hadn't written in it in months, maybe longer. The pages still smelled faintly like peppermint from an ancient lip balm I kept inside the front pocket. I started writing. Not poetry, not a rant, just facts. Words I couldn't say out loud. She thinks I'm embarrassing. They erase me one tag at a time. I used to be someone they thanked. Now I'm someone they tolerate. Barely. I flipped back a few pages. One entry, dated over a year ago, caught my eye. It was from the week Marjorie got accepted into grad school. Thank you for everything. I couldn't do this without you. Her handwriting was looped and soft, scribbled on a post-it note she'd left in my glove box after I drove 6 hours to help her move. I ran my fingers over the ink until it smudged slightly. Then I closed the journal and whispered into the dark, "Yeah, apparently you can." I left the journal on my nightstand and stayed in bed longer than usual the next morning. It wasn't that I was tired, my body was used to long hours, but something in me felt still. The kind of stillness that settles in after you've stopped making excuses for people. By noon, I was at the shop. I didn't have customers booked that afternoon, just a couple of oil filters to reorder and some paperwork to catch up on. I brewed coffee, booted up my laptop, and sat down at my desk in the office that doubled as a storage closet. That's when I noticed the envelope. It had come with the morning mail and sat between a parts invoice and a tire catalog. Plain white. No return address beyond Lexington Higher Education Foundation. I tore it open with a screwdriver tip. Dear Miss Calloway, we would like to formally thank you for your generous contribution to our 2023 Academic Merit Fund. Your support has helped students like Marjorie Calloway thrive in their continued educational pursuits. I stopped reading. Marjorie. I flipped the page over. There it was, her name, bolded in the announcement section. Recipient of the 2023 Honor Scholarship, sponsored by Miss Delphine Calloway. I blinked. My fingers tightened around the paper. I'd never filled out anything for that foundation, never made a public donation. I'd paid her tuition, sure, quietly, monthly. But this? They made it sound like I'd raised a banner, stood behind a podium, only I hadn't been there. And no one had told me this existed. I stood abruptly, the office chair scraping behind me. It didn't make sense, not at first. I thought maybe it was an administrative error. Someone had added my name by mistake. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't random. Someone used my name, on purpose. Back in the fall, Marjorie had texted me, saying she needed a scan of my ID for a FAFSA emergency, something about verifying her independent status. I didn't think twice. I'd been helping her for years. I dug through my email archives and found it within seconds. There it was, in my sent folder. ID, signature, everything. Staring at that old email made my stomach twist. It was the kind of twist that comes when you realize you weren't just overlooked. You were used. I opened my laptop and started searching. If this scholarship existed, it had to be public somewhere. Sure enough, within minutes I found it. A press release from the university's donor banquet. The headline read, "Top donors honored for their support of student excellence." There was a slideshow embedded at the bottom. I clicked through, fast at first, then slower when I saw familiar faces. Slide 14 stopped me cold. There she was, my mother, standing at a podium accepting a plaque. The caption beneath it, "Mrs. Nadine Calloway, accepting on behalf of the Calloway family in honor of their daughter's scholarship gift." Not my name, not my gift, just the family. The bile that rose in my throat wasn't rage, not yet. It was disbelief. I'd funded my sister's education for nearly 3 years. Quietly, consistently. I'd done it to give her a shot she couldn't afford herself. And now they had the nerve to polish it up and pass it off as some noble family effort? I sat down hard, staring at the screen. Then I clicked on the event video. Mom was smiling wide, wearing the blue blazer she only pulled out for weddings and court dates. She said things like, "We believe in supporting our youth," and "We always knew Marjorie was meant for more." I didn't exist in that speech. Not even a passing mention. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't about money anymore. This was erasure. First from Easter, then the group chat, then the family photos, now from my own act of generosity. They weren't just pushing me out of the picture. They were cropping me out of the story entirely. Back at my desk, I pulled open my banking app. I'd kept the tuition payments on autopilot for so long, I barely noticed them leave my account anymore. Tuition, books, housing. I tapped over to recurring transfers. There it was, scheduled for the 5th of each month. Next payment, $2,250. I stared at it for a long time. One tap could freeze the whole thing. No warning, no explanation. Just like they'd done to me. I didn't hit cancel. Not yet. But I hovered. My thumb was steady, and for the first time in weeks, so was my heart. That night, I left the banking app open on my screen, the cursor still hovering over the cancel button. I didn't click it. Not yet. But something had shifted. The kind of shift you don't always recognize until it catches up with you days later, like a slow crack in a windshield finally spreading all the way across. The next morning, I ran out of brake fluid in the garage. I'd placed a wholesale order last week, so I swung by the local supplier to grab it. I keep a company credit card for shop expenses, basic stuff, parts, fluids, inspection tools, nothing fancy. I slid it across the counter like I always did. The guy behind the counter swiped it, frowned, swiped again. Then he looked up at me, awkward. "Sorry, Del. It's not going through." I blinked. "That can't be right. Try it again." He did. Still nothing. I paid in cash, grabbed my receipt, and walked out with the box in hand, heartbeat picking up with every step. Something was wrong. Really wrong. Back at the shop, I logged into my personal credit portal. I didn't even finish my coffee before the screen loaded and I saw it. Outstanding balance. $3,814.27 new card issued under my name. Charges over the last 2 months. Flights. Sephora. Wine bars in Louisville. I hadn't flown anywhere in over a year. I hadn't bought perfume since Christmas. I couldn't remember the last time I sipped wine that didn't come from a twist cap. I pulled up the detailed statement. One charge was a stay at a boutique hotel downtown. The same weekend I had a transmission replacement emergency in the shop. Another was a purchase from an upscale salon. Hair extensions, lashes, a color job. The shipping address linked to the card? Travis's apartment, not mine. And just like that, the pattern came into full view. Marjorie didn't just lean on me for tuition. She was living off me. She had quietly stepped into my financial shoes, one purchase, one lie, one forged form at a time. I sat there in the dim light of my office, the door half shut, the quiet humming of the garage's air compressor somewhere behind me. I stared at the numbers, the dates, the receipts, feeling something between fury and humiliation start to rise. I hadn't even noticed. I opened another browser tab and searched for small business credit scores. Then I clicked into mine. It had dropped 72 points since February. That explained the call I got last week when I tried applying for a small renovation loan to expand the shop. The bank had stalled, told me there were outstanding issues and to check back in 30 days. I didn't think much of it then. I do now. I ran a trace on the mailing address, confirmed the cross streets. Travis's name was on the lease. I recognized the complex, bougie place with valet trash and those little community libraries on every corner. I scrolled through my contacts, stopping at my bank rep's name. I didn't press call. Not yet. Instead, I pulled screenshots, statements, fraud alerts, credit notices, every receipt I could find. I created a folder and emailed it to myself, just in case. Back home, I heated up leftover chili and sat on the couch, my laptop beside me. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. It made my thoughts louder. This wasn't just about Marjorie anymore, or Easter, or even the scholarship. This was theft. This was erasure. This was betrayal with a price tag and my name on the receipt. I opened a draft message on my phone. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the credit card and everything else." I stared at it, reread it. My thumb hovered over send, but I didn't send it, because I already knew what would happen. They'd deflect, spin it, turn it into a misunderstanding, call me sensitive, accuse me of blowing things out of proportion, just like always. So instead, I backspaced slowly, watching each letter disappear until the message was gone. Then I locked my phone, leaned back into the couch, and let my silence do the talking. They won't hear it. They'll spin it. Like always. Friday came and went like fog on glass, quiet, still, and hard to wipe off. I couldn't focus at work. Every time the phone buzzed, I thought it might be her. Or worse, Mom. Instead, it was Travis. He showed up just after 6, pulling into the lot behind the shop in his silver Subaru. I was tightening a bolt on a customer's front axle when I heard the tires crunch over gravel. He stepped out, holding a small cardboard box like it was ticking. Hey, he said, voice low, unsure. Is now a bad time? I wiped my hands on a rag and straightened. Depends. Are you about to make my day worse? He offered a strained smile and held out the box. This came to my place. It had your name on it, but Marjorie said it was a mix-up. I took it. The return label read, Belle Lux Skincare. I didn't use Belle Lux. I didn't even know what Belle Lux was, but the last name printed under my first? My own. I didn't say anything, just motioned for him to follow me inside. The office smelled like warm motor oil and day-old coffee. I opened the box while Travis stood awkwardly in the doorway. Inside were 2 glass jars, anti-aging serums, both $119 apiece. A receipt tucked under the bubble wrap confirmed the shipping address. His apartment. Travis leaned on the doorframe. You didn't send that to yourself? I shook my head. He watched me for a long beat, then sat down. She said your parents were paying her tuition. She said you were kind of not around much. I pulled open my drawer, grabbed a folder, and dropped it on the desk in front of him. You should see this. Credit statements, scholarship letters, copies of receipts, bank emails. It was all there. I didn't explain. I didn't have to. His eyes moved slowly over each page, the color draining from his face. This is a lot, he said finally, voice hollow. She used my info. She forged my signature. My mother accepted a plaque meant for me like she earned it. I paused, jaw clenched. I've been paying for everything. Not them, me. He leaned back like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. She lied to me, he whispered, about all of it. She lies like it's air, I said flatly. She doesn't even flinch anymore. Travis ran a hand through his hair. I had no idea. Yeah, I murmured. That's the point. He stood up slowly. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just don't pretend you didn't see it. He hesitated. Are you going to tell her I know? I looked up at him. Not yet. He gave a slight nod, then turned and left without another word. I sat there for a long time, staring at the receipts scattered across my desk, heart pounding against the weight of years I'd spent pretending this kind of betrayal was normal. That night I got the call. Mom. Her name blinked on my phone screen just after 9. I answered on the 3rd ring, bracing myself. Delphine, sweetheart, she began, syrupy sweet. How are you holding up? I didn't respond. She continued. I heard there's been confusion, maybe some tension between you and your sister. Tension? I snapped. You mean the credit fraud? The lies? The fact she's used my name and money like they're hers? There was a pause. Then, in the calmest tone she could fake, she said, Let's not blow things out of proportion. I almost laughed. You knew, didn't you? I said. Marjorie's under so much pressure, she deflected. This isn't like her, you know that. I pressed my fingers against my temple. It's exactly like her, and you've let her get away with it her whole life. She's just trying to survive. So am I, Mom, I snapped. And I'm tired of doing it with one hand tied behind my back while she rides on my shoulders. Silence stretched between us. Then she sighed. You've always been so emotional. And there it was, the dismissal, the gaslight, the same script they always used when I dared to speak up. I ended the call without another word. Back in the garage, alone under the buzz of the flickering shop light, I picked up my phone again, typed one sentence, one chance. Tell Travis everything, or I will. I hit send and watched the little delivered checkmark appear. Then I set the phone down, walked to the corner cabinet, and pulled out the dusty manila folder I hadn't touched in over a year. Inside was the original account authorization form, the one I used to set up her tuition autopay, the same one I was about to destroy. Saturday morning started like any other. The garage opened at 9, and the crew rolled in with coffee cups and playlists. The smell of grease and burnt toast from the deli next door mingled in the air. I was under the hood of a '97 Bronco, humming along to a Stevie Nicks song, when I heard the front bay door slam open. Then her voice. You froze my card? Are you out of your mind? Marjorie. I hit my head on the hood latch as I jerked upright. My entire crew stopped what they were doing. Even Kenny, who never takes out his earbuds, turned to look. Customers froze mid-conversation. One man holding a donut actually dropped it. She stomped into the center of the shop in heels too tall for asphalt and rage too loud for reason. Her face was red, eyes glossy, hair pulled into one of those buns that screamed chaos. "You think you're clever?" she spat. "Travis knows. Mom's furious. You humiliated me." I glanced at Luis, my junior tech, who was already pulling out his phone, not subtly. "Do you want to do this here?" I asked, wiping my hands on a rag, keeping my voice low. "You already did this here," she shrieked. "I got declined trying to check into a hotel this morning, like some broke con artist. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" "Probably a lot like what it felt like getting denied a car loan for a business expansion," I said, "because someone ran up charges under my name and trashed my credit." She blinked. Then she tried to recover. "It wasn't like that." I stepped forward. "No? What was it like, Marjorie? Fraud adjacent? Accidentally stealing? I gave you years of my money, my trust, my silence. You wore it like perfume." Someone in the back whispered, "Sheesh." Marjorie glanced around, saw phones up, eyes on her. Her voice lowered, but her venom stayed. "You've always hated that I have more." That made me laugh. "You have more what? More shame? More audacity? You stole from me, lied to everyone, and you expected me to keep funding your life like some invisible bank account with no PIN number and no limits." She shook her head. "You're just bitter. You never got out of this dump." I raised my voice clear and steady. "No, Marjorie. I built this dump. With busted knuckles and long nights and no help from you, you don't get to walk in here and spit on it." The silence after that was thick. Finally, Luis spoke. "I got the whole thing." I nodded once. "Good." Marjorie's mouth opened, then shut. She turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard the glass rattled. 10 minutes later, Travis showed up. He looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept or shaved in 2 days. He walked past the front desk holding an envelope, folded and crumpled like it had been stuffed in a pocket for hours. He handed it to me without a word. I opened it. A letter, creased, stained, torn in one corner. The university scholarship letter, addressed to me. My name, my donation, my thanks. He finally spoke. "I found it in her trash." I looked at him. "She didn't even shred it?" "She didn't even read it," he replied. I asked her about it. She said, "It was just some donor thing Delphine got weird about." I nodded, pressing my lips together. "She didn't even try to lie well," he added, eyes dull. I set the letter down. "Thank you for bringing it." He paused. "You were right." "Too late now," I said, not unkindly. "Just final." That night, I didn't pour a drink. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone to vent. I sat at my desk in my apartment, flipped open my laptop, and logged into the university payment portal. The tuition autopay still sat there like a ticking bomb, waiting to go off again in 4 days. I clicked Edit, then Delete Payment Method. A red warning popped up. "This action is irreversible. Are you sure?" I didn't blink. Yes, I clicked it. And for the first time in years, I exhaled. Long, full, and clean. It felt like breathing real air after months of being underwater. The silence after I clicked yes didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Clean. Like the absence of something rotting. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, opened the windows, and let the air in. It was crisp with spring, and for the first time in what felt like months, I made coffee without checking my bank account or bracing for another betrayal. But peace never lasts long when you're dealing with people who only know control through chaos. 3 days later, I found a letter in my mailbox. Real paper, blue ink, careful cursive that I recognized instantly. Nadine's handwriting. My mother still believed in the power of pen over text, especially when she wanted to seem warm. Honest. "Delphine, families argue. We fight. We forgive. It's what we do. Come by next Sunday. I'll make that lemon tart you love. Let's talk like grown-ups." There was even a little heart drawn at the end of her name. If I hadn't lived 34 years in that woman's orbit, I might have melted at the sugar. Instead, I folded the note neatly and slid it into the drawer with the expired coupons and half-dead pens. Later that afternoon, I stopped at Sweet Hollow Cafe to grab a sandwich. A woman in a pastel cardigan smiled at me from the line. Mrs. Palmer. She lived 2 doors down and had given out cinnamon cookies last Christmas. "Oh, honey," she said, reaching to pat my arm. "I'm so sorry to hear what happened with Marjorie." I froze mid-reach for the napkins. "Sorry to hear what?" She tilted her head with that sympathetic frown, Southern women perfect by age 50. "About how things fell apart between you two. Nadine told me it's been rough. She said you've been struggling, a little jealous, lashing out." I blinked. "She said you cut off Marjorie's school funds over some personal grudge, that you're under stress. But don't worry," she whispered like she was sharing a family secret. "We all go through hard seasons. I told her you just need grace." It hit me like a slap made of honey. I smiled tight. "Thanks, Mrs. Palmer." Then I turned, walked out of the cafe without my sandwich, and sat in my truck until my hands stopped shaking. She'd done it. Nadine had pulled her favorite move, wrapped cruelty in concern, coded shame in sympathy, and served it to the neighbors before I could even finish catching my breath. She wanted to play the wounded matriarch, paint me as unstable, bitter, the broken sibling who couldn't handle her sister's success. They never wanted the truth, just a better narrative. Later that night, I sat at the table flipping through old photos on my phone, and one stopped me. A shot from the scholarship banquet 2 years ago, the one I didn't attend. I hadn't known I was even supposed to be there. But there she was, Nadine, dressed in pearls, holding a plaque, beaming like she'd earned it herself. The caption on the university's Facebook page read, "Mrs. Calloway, attending in honor of the family donor." Not a donor, not even the daughter who donated. The family, no mention of me. I set the phone down and laughed, dry and hollow. She never wanted a daughter who rebuilt carburetors and smelled like engine oil. She wanted a daughter who fit into pearls and posed for plaques. So I wrote, not to her, not to Marjorie. I opened my social media account and drafted a post. No names, no drama, just a photo of the scholarship letter and a single sentence. "When you're erased by your own, write your name back in ink." I hit post. At first silence, then slow likes, a few comments, one from a former classmate. "I always knew you were the backbone." Another from a neighbor. "About damn time." The rest was quiet, but not the kind that felt lonely. It felt still. I powered off my phone, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. Then, standing in the dark of my own apartment, I whispered into the stillness, "Let them come now." The next morning arrived with no fury, no fallout, just quiet. Not the kind that weighed you down, but the kind that made you think, maybe I made it out alive. I opened the curtains slowly, letting sunlight paint golden lines across my living room floor. I poured coffee, stronger than usual, and sat on the couch with my legs tucked underneath me. The house felt still, but not sad. Before touching my phone, I did something I hadn't done in months. I pulled out the old photo box, the one I kept in the closet under the toolbox, behind the dusty tax folders and extra spark plugs. The first picture that surfaced was us as kids, me in overalls holding a wrench, Marjorie beside me in a tulle skirt, pouting because I wouldn't let her use the socket set like it was a toy. Mom had labeled it in Sharpie, "Delphine and Marjorie, opposites forever." I set it aside and opened my phone, scrolling back through our old messages. Birthday greetings, screenshots of her grades, emojis, casual updates. The usual stuff between sisters who didn't live together, but still tried. Then there were the ones that hurt more. "Thanks again for helping me with tuition. You're my hero." Or, "I owe you forever, Del." Forever, huh? Apparently forever had a shorter shelf life than I'd thought. I tapped out of messages and opened the university's billing portal again. Her name was still listed on my payment profile. Tuition, books, meal plans. All filed neatly under Authorized User. I clicked into the settings. A pending payment sat scheduled for the following Friday. $2,900 for spring enrollment. The system prompted a warning. Removing this method will affect student enrollment status. Continue? I didn't blink. Yes. Delete. There was no confirmation page. Just a final flash of white and the quiet refresh of the screen, now absent of my card. Done. If this meant she got unenrolled, she'd have to deal with it. She could explain it to the registrar, to her loan officer, to herself. I closed the laptop and sat back, waiting, not in guilt, not in fear. Just in expectation. Like a tide I knew would come in eventually. It took less than 3 hours. The first notification came as a missed call, then a text. Marjorie, did you cancel the payment? Marjorie, are you serious right now? Marjorie, I'm going to lose everything. You don't get to do this. I didn't answer. Then came an email. Her subject line was all caps. You're ruining my life. I didn't open it. Then a voicemail from Nadine. Delphine? She began in that voice she saved for obituaries and bank managers. I just spoke to Marjorie. What you've done, it's not just cruel, it's vindictive. You're hurting your sister's future out of some childish resentment. I waited until the message ended before calling her back. She picked up on the second ring, her breath tight like she was expecting a storm. You're ruining her life, she repeated. No, I said calmly. She did that herself. Click. Later that afternoon, I found out through Travis, he left a note in her handwriting on my windshield, that he had moved out. Just packed his stuff, dropped her key on the counter, and drove to Cincinnati to stay with his cousin. The note read, You tried to tell me. I should have listened. I'm sorry. I folded it once and slipped it into my glove box. That evening, the sun dipped slow behind the trees, casting long shadows across my balcony. I sat outside with a glass of ginger ale, watching the clouds shift. My phone, usually a grenade of notifications, sat face down and still. It shouldn't feel this good to finally be done, I whispered, but it did, and I let it. Easter morning came soft and slow, like a breath I didn't have to hold anymore. The streets were quiet except for the distant bell of St. Luke's ringing out across the rooftops. Most homes in Lexington were already bustling with family noise, ham in the oven, dresses zipped, bow ties crooked. But my shop was still. No scent of cinnamon rolls, no floral centerpieces, just motor oil, faint gasoline, and a silence I had grown to crave. I unlocked the side door to the garage out of habit more than need. The place was closed, but I wanted the comfort of routine. Coffee brewed in the corner, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the rhythmic clink of tools as I tidied the bench. The quiet wasn't empty. It was mine. I sat on the rolling stool by Bay 3, sipping from my chipped mug, and watched a lone leaf float across the concrete floor. No one was texting. No one was demanding. No one was expecting me to smile through it. For once, there was no invitation to be excluded from. And weirdly, that was its own kind of freedom. Later that afternoon, as the sun lifted higher and warmth touched the shop's steel beams, my inbox pinged. An email from the university. Sponsor information updated. No current payer on file for Marjorie Calloway. Attached was a notification that tuition was now overdue. No automatic extension. No deferment filed. I barely had time to close it before another one came in. A fraud alert from the bank. An attempt had been made to charge a flight to my canceled card. The decline had already been issued. But the attempt was there. A final pull at a cord I had already cut. She still hadn't realized it wasn't hers anymore. Travis, I heard from the grapevine, had packed Marjorie's remaining boxes and dropped them on Mom's porch with no note. No warning. Just walked away like someone finally freeing themselves from the gravity of someone else's orbit. That night, my phone buzzed again. A long message from Nadine. We're still your family. Don't let one mistake ruin everything. You've always been strong. Don't become bitter. I stared at it a long while, then typed, One mistake didn't ruin everything. 100 silences did. I hit send. That was it. No punctuation, no apology, just truth. The next morning, Inez showed up. No text ahead, no dramatic knock. She stood in my doorway holding 2 coffees and a paper bag of warm biscuits. Didn't feel like letting you spend Easter weekend alone, she said simply. We sat on my back steps, watching the neighborhood cats dart between fences. How you holding up? She asked gently, not prying, not pretending. I took a slow breath, nodded. Better than I ever thought I could. She smiled and passed me the cinnamon biscuit. You've always been the one who fixed what was broken. This time I didn't correct her. 3 weeks passed. Spring rolled in for real. The dogwoods bloomed outside the shop windows, and we had to open the bays early each morning just to let the air move. The garage was busier than ever. I hired a second tech, Lisa, sharp with diagnostics and quicker than most guys I'd trained. We knocked out jobs in half the time, and customers started showing up just to ask if the lady who fixed their brakes was available again. On a Tuesday morning, a little girl, maybe 6, came in with her mom for an oil change. She handed me a folded piece of notebook paper with a crayon drawing on the front. A lopsided car sat on top of a castle, and underneath it read, Miss Delphine's Car Castle. I laughed, really laughed. Then I pinned it to the corkboard in my office, right beside the folded scholarship letter. The one with my name that had almost been erased. Not anymore. The ink had dried, and it was staying. And this time, the name on the plaque is mine. Just mine. Healing doesn't always look like a big turning point. It doesn't always arrive with a breakdown or breakthrough. Sometimes healing just shows up. Quietly. It can look like a full night of sleep after weeks of anxiety. It can sound like your own breath when you finally stop holding it in. It can feel like peace, not because something dramatic happened, but because you've stopped waiting for someone else's permission to let go. I used to think loyalty meant staying silent. I believed that being a good daughter, a good sister, a good friend meant not rocking the boat, even if that boat was sinking. I thought love meant shrinking myself to make room for other people's comfort, even if it made me disappear. But here's the truth. I've come to learn the hard way. Silence isn't love. Silence is the soil where resentment grows. It's where truth gets buried, and pain gets passed down like an heirloom. When you finally speak up, when you finally say enough, you risk losing people. You risk being called selfish, dramatic, difficult. You might hear that you've changed, as if that's a bad thing. But here's what they won't tell you. In losing them, you find you. The version of you that doesn't shrink, doesn't hide, and doesn't apologize for needing honesty and respect. So if you're watching this, and you've ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or used by the people you thought would always have your back, hear me when I say this. You are not broken. You are not too much. And you do not owe anyone your silence in exchange for love. Choosing yourself isn't betrayal. It isn't selfish. It's how you stay whole. It's how you survive. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you love? Do you think love, especially in families, should come without conditions? Or do you believe that love and accountability go hand in hand? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if this message hit home, if it made you feel a little less alone or reminded you of your strength, drop a 1 or tell me what city you're in. I read every comment. Seriously. And if you want more conversations like this, real talk for real people living through real things, go ahead and hit subscribe. There's more to come, and I'd love for you to be part of it.
Suddenly, scorching hot tea splashed across my face. The sharp, stinging pain hit me instantly, leaving me frozen in shock. As I wiped the burning liquid off, I looked up to see my mother-in-law, Amy, standing there, holding the empty cup in her hand. Her face was expressionless, cold and distant, as though she had meant to do it. I was trying to process what had just happened, but the shock left me speechless. This wasn't the first time Amy had pushed the boundaries, but I was certain it would be the last. Her icy eyes met mine, and as her harsh voice pierced the silence, I knew I'd reached my breaking point. My name is Cheryl, and I'm 35 years old. What started as a hopeful marriage to Scott has turned into a daily battle, one not only with him but also with his mother, Amy. Scott and I met in college, both pursuing degrees in business administration, dreaming of successful careers in finance. 5 years ago, we were filled with hope as we got married, ready to start a life together. But 5 months ago, Scott lost his job and everything changed. Since then, I've been working hard in the finance world, making a steady income of around $80,000 a month through stock trading. It's enough to cover our household expenses, but for Amy, it's never enough. She never fully approved of me, and since Scott's job loss, her resentment has only intensified. Despite my financial support, covering the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and more, Amy continued to demand more. Her latest request was that I contribute an additional $5,000 monthly, even though I was already shouldering every bill on my own. One morning, after Scott left for what I hoped would be a promising job interview, Amy cornered me in the kitchen. She sat at the table, sipping her tea and glaring at me as I cleaned the counters. Her words were laced with hostility as she said, "You think just because you're earning some money, you don't have to pay your share?" I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my calm. "Amy, I am covering all the bills. What more could you possibly want?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Without missing a beat, she snapped, "I want you to contribute $5,000 more each month." She said it as if this was the most reasonable request in the world. I shook my head, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. "I'm already paying for everything, Amy. I don't have anything more to give," I replied firmly, though I could feel the tension tightening in my chest. Her gaze narrowed, and she hissed, "Then maybe you should think about leaving. If you can't pull your weight, you don't belong in this house." Her words stung, but they also solidified what I'd known for a long time. I was no longer welcome here. Amy was unwilling to accept me as part of the family, and her demands were only a reflection of her resentment. In that moment, I realized that I needed to make a decision not just for myself, but for my own peace of mind and self-respect. This was no longer just a struggle for acceptance. It was about reclaiming my sense of worth and finding a life free from this constant battle. That day, I finally decided I would no longer let Amy's disapproval define my life. I was ready to take a step towards a future where I could be truly happy, even if it meant leaving behind the life I had worked so hard to build. I was the one holding everything together in our household, not Scott. Yet, Amy had the nerve to demand even more from me. My patience finally snapped. "I'm not the one slacking here, Amy," I said firmly. "Maybe you should be asking your son to contribute before coming after me." That's when she lost it. In a flash of anger, Amy jumped up, grabbed her cup of tea, and threw it directly at my face. The scorching liquid hit my skin, but the shock and hurt from the vicious act cut even deeper. I stumbled back, stunned and silent, as she stormed off, muttering about how ungrateful I was and how I didn't deserve to be in her family. In that moment, I knew I couldn't stay in that house another day. That night, I packed my things and left. Scott wasn't home, probably at another unsuccessful job interview, I guessed. I didn't wait for him to return. I went back to my parents' house, feeling a mix of exhaustion, relief, and sadness. Days passed, and I didn't hear a single word from Scott. No call, no message. At first, I was surprised. I had expected at least some kind of apology or explanation. But as the weeks went by, it became clear to me that I meant very little to him, or at least far less than his mother did. A month passed, and my feelings for Scott began to shift. What once was love faded into a sense of clarity. I realized I couldn't return to a marriage where I was constantly devalued and manipulated. I began to consider divorce seriously, finally accepting that my happiness and self-respect were more important than holding on to a broken relationship. One early morning, the doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the monitor and was stunned to see Scott and Amy standing outside. They looked exactly the same as the last time I'd seen them, as though nothing had changed. "What now?" I muttered, feeling my frustration rise. Reluctantly, I pressed the intercom button. "Yes? What can I do for you?" I asked, keeping my tone calm despite the growing frustration inside me. Amy's voice crackled through the speaker, cold and sharp. "I've forgiven you, Cheryl," she declared, as if bestowing some grand favor. "Come back home now." My eyebrows shot up. "Forgiven me?" I repeated, both confused and angry. For what, exactly? I hadn't done anything wrong, yet here she was, acting as if she had power over me. Without another word, I ended the call and stepped away from the door, my heart racing with anger. But they didn't leave. Instead, they started banging on the door, their voices growing louder and more insistent. "Don't just hang up on us. Let us in," Amy shouted. Not wanting to disturb my parents or the neighbors, I reluctantly opened the door, deciding it was better to hear them out and bring this ordeal to a close. Scott and Amy stepped inside, and I motioned for them to sit on the living room sofa. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for whatever confrontation awaited me. I was done being trampled. This time, I was determined to get the answers I deserved. I took a steadying breath and faced them both directly. "What do you want?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. Amy leaned forward, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "You need to come back," she declared, her tone dismissive. "It's time to stop acting like a child and return to your responsibilities." My jaw clenched at her words. "You told me to leave, Amy. I left because of you. Now, you expect me to come back like nothing happened?" My voice was calm, but I could feel the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Our conversation quickly turned heated. Amy accused me of abandoning Scott and my duties to the household, while I reminded her of the mistreatment and constant hostility I had endured under her roof. The argument rose to a fever pitch, voices overlapping until, finally, Scott broke his silence. His voice was soft and unsteady. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." Amy turned to him, her anger momentarily subsiding.
"What is it?" she demanded.
Scott looked down, avoiding her eyes. I've been out of work for months now, Mom. Cheryl was the one supporting us all along. I wasn't contributing anything." Amy's face twisted in shock and disbelief. "What do you mean? You told me everything was fine." Scott sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I didn't want you to worry. I thought I'd find something soon, but I just didn't." His excuse only seemed to enrage Amy further. She exploded, her anger shifting entirely onto Scott. "So you've been lying to me? Relying on her while sitting around doing nothing?" She glared at him, her voice dripping with disappointment. As I watched them unravel, a strange calm washed over me. This was exactly the toxic environment I had escaped, and I knew I couldn't return. Quietly, I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers I had been holding onto for weeks. I placed them in Scott's hands, his eyes widening in shock as he stared down at the documents, uncomprehending. "Cheryl, this is too sudden," he finally stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't you think we should at least talk about this?" I shook my head, feeling a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. "I've had weeks to think about it, Scott. You didn't reach out once. You didn't care. Your mother has treated me terribly, and you've stood by, letting it happen. I won't go back to that house, Scott." Amy jumped to her feet, fury flashing across her face. "You think you can just walk away after everything we've done for you?" she sneered. I met her gaze, unwavering. "Done for me?" I scoffed. "Amy, you've made my life miserable from the day I moved in. I was the one supporting the household while Scott was out of work, and yet you still demanded more from me. I won't let either of you take advantage of me anymore." Scott's face turned red, a mix of frustration and desperation. "You can't just give up on our marriage because of a few arguments with my mom." "This isn't just a few arguments, Scott," I said firmly. "It's a pattern of disrespect, manipulation, and indifference. I needed your support, and instead, you let your mother tear me down over and over. I refuse to keep sacrificing my happiness for a marriage that only hurts me." For a moment, Scott said nothing, looking between me and his mother, perhaps realizing for the first time how deeply this had affected me. But it was too late. I had given everything I had, and now all I wanted was peace. Without another word, I stood up and walked toward the door, leaving them both to grapple with the reality of my decision. For the first time in a long time, I felt free to rebuild my life on my own terms, without the constant weight of someone else's judgment or demands. And I knew I was ready to face whatever came next. I looked at Scott, my voice unwavering. "You stood by and watched while your mother verbally and emotionally tore me down. You never defended me, never stood up for me, and now, when I needed you the most, you didn't even check if I was okay." Amy's face twisted with fury, disbelief evident in her eyes. "Ungrateful woman. After everything I've done for you, keeping this house running, allowing you to live here." I cut her off, my tone cold. "Amy, I was the one paying for everything, yet you still demanded more. The room fell silent, my words settling heavily in the air. Scott glanced between me and his mother, clearly at a loss. He knew it was true. He had relied on me, doing little to change our situation. "I'm done, Scott," I said, my voice final. "Sign the papers." He hesitated, his hands trembling as he held the pen. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked, his voice low, almost as if he hoped I'd reconsider. "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, feeling a wave of relief wash over me as he signed the papers. Amy, unable to contain her anger any longer, stormed out of the room, her voice echoing down the hallway. "You'll regret this, Cheryl. You'll regret leaving us." I watched her leave, her threats fading as she disappeared down the hall. But I felt no fear, no regret, only peace. It was finally over. 5 weeks passed, and life at my parents' house felt calm and simple. The divorce papers had been filed, and I was slowly piecing together a new life. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Amy. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral even as I felt a twinge of anxiety. "Cheryl, the electricity and gas have been cut off," she said, her voice edged with desperation. "I know you're no longer with Scott, but could you at least help us pay the bills this month? Just until Scott finds a job." I was stunned. After everything they'd put me through, she was asking for my help. "No, Amy," I replied firmly. "I'm not responsible for your household anymore. Ask Scott to take care of it." She scoffed, her voice sharp. "He can't. He hasn't found a job yet, and we need help." "Then you'll have to figure it out," I said calmly, my hand hovering over the end call button. "I'm not getting involved anymore." "You can't just abandon us like this," she shouted, her voice laced with anger and desperation. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm moving on," I said, and with that, I ended the call and blocked her number. A few more months passed, and life finally began to settle into a new, fulfilling rhythm. I focused on my work, my happiness, and my goals. I was thriving, free from the weight of their constant demands. For the first time in a long time, I was building a life that was entirely mine. I received a message from Scott one day. He apologized for everything, admitting he should have defended me. He mentioned he'd finally found a job at a factory. Despite his apology, I felt no need to reconnect with him or his mother, so I blocked his number as well. I had moved on, and reopening old wounds felt pointless. About 5 months after the divorce, I met someone new. His name was Jerry, and he was kind, dependable, and respectful, everything I had hoped for but never found in Scott. We took things slowly, enjoying each other's company without rushing. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly happy and at peace. As for Amy, she finally faced consequences for her actions. After I reported the tea incident, the legal system recognized it for what it was: assault. She was charged, fined, and sentenced to community service. Scott, on the other hand, was ordered to pay spousal support, a fitting consequence for his inaction and reliance on me throughout our marriage. In the end, I had gained more than freedom from a toxic relationship. I found clarity, confidence, and a new sense of peace. My life was moving forward. I left behind the manipulation, constant criticism, and heavy expectations that had weighed on me. My career in finance continued to thrive, and I enjoyed the freedom and self-sufficiency that came with it. Occasionally, I thought of Scott and his mother, but those thoughts passed quickly. That chapter was firmly closed, and there was no going back. Jerry and I grew closer, and the connection between us felt real and easy. There were no endless demands or expectations, just mutual respect and understanding. For the first time in years, I could focus on what genuinely made me happy. One afternoon, while catching up on work at a cafe, I received an email that made my heart skip a beat. The subject line read, "Request for reconsideration of spousal support." It was from Scott's lawyer. I opened it, my heart pounding, but as I read through the contents, a calmness settled over me. Scott was appealing to reduce the spousal support payments, citing financial difficulties. He explained that his factory job wasn't paying enough to cover his living expenses and the spousal support. Additionally, he claimed Amy's health issues were straining their finances. It was clear they were hoping I would feel guilty and reconsider. But I had left that life behind, along with the guilt and manipulation. I was done playing their games. I had paid my dues, both emotionally and financially. Without hesitation, I forwarded Scott's email to my lawyer, confident that the law would support me. A few weeks later, we appeared in court. Scott and his lawyer argued that his financial situation was too strained to continue paying spousal support. He presented documents showing his minimal earnings from his factory job and highlighted Amy's increasing medical expenses. But my lawyer was prepared. She pointed out that throughout our marriage, I had been the primary and often sole financial provider while Scott contributed very little. The spousal support was fair, given the years I had spent supporting him and his mother. My lawyer also reminded the court of the toxic environment I had endured, especially mentioning Amy's assault on me. As the hearing continued, I noticed the frustration building on Scott's face. He was not used to facing the consequences of his actions. For the first time, he was being held accountable, and it clearly unsettled him. After carefully listening to both sides, the judge delivered the verdict. Scott's request to reduce spousal support was denied. Although the court acknowledged his financial struggles, they weren't enough to justify lowering the payments. The judge also noted that Amy's behavior had significantly contributed to the breakdown of our marriage and emphasized that Scott needed to take responsibility for his choices, or lack thereof. As we left the courtroom, Scott approached me, his expression a mix of frustration and desperation. "Cheryl, please can't we work something out? I'm struggling." "You don't have to do this," he pleaded. I looked at him, feeling a fleeting pang of sympathy, but quickly reminded myself of everything I had endured. "Scott, I spent years supporting you and your mother, and all I got in return was disrespect and manipulation. I've moved on. You need to figure things out for yourself." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, leaving him behind. I wasn't angry, just relieved to finally be free from a life that had drained me of my energy and happiness. In the following months, I heard through mutual friends that Amy's health was deteriorating. She had been diagnosed with a serious illness, and Scott was struggling to care for her. While a part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, I reminded myself that their lives were no longer my responsibility. I had done my part. It was now up to Scott to step up. Meanwhile, my own life was blossoming. Jerry and I had grown closer, and we were discussing the possibility of taking the next step in our relationship. He valued my independence and supported my ambitions, qualities I had never experienced in my previous marriage. Being with someone who respected and appreciated me without trying to control or change me was refreshing and empowering. One day, as I was scrolling through the news on my phone, I realized how far I had come. My life was finally my own, filled with peace, growth, and genuine happiness. The struggles and the pain of my past seemed distant, like a closed chapter in a book. I was living fully, free from the shadows of my past, and ready for whatever new adventures lay ahead. A headline caught my eye: "Local woman sentenced for assault in tea incident." My heart raced as I clicked on the article, and there it was, an update on Amy. The case I had filed against her for throwing hot tea at me had finally come to an end. The court found her guilty of assault, sentencing her to pay a significant fine and complete additional community service. A wave of emotions hit me as I read the words. Amy had finally been held accountable. It wasn't about celebrating her downfall. It was about the peace that came with knowing justice had been served. It felt like the last piece of closure I needed. Months later, I was out to dinner with Jerry, reflecting on how far I'd come. I had walked away from a toxic marriage, faced legal challenges, and emerged stronger on the other side. I found happiness in my career, in my relationship with Jerry, and most importantly, within myself. The burdens of the past no longer weighed me down. Amy and Scott were behind me, and I was free to live on my own terms. As I smiled across the table at Jerry, I knew I was ready for whatever the future held. The painful chapters of my life had closed, and a new, hopeful one was opening. I was free, strong, and finally at peace, ready to embrace all the good things life had to offer. Janet Varney was now 29, but she still felt a sharp pain in her stomach as the end of the year came closer. She sipped her cold coffee and looked at her phone. There were 10 missed calls, all from her mom. Her apartment was small, but it was hers. After finishing university, she had started working as a copywriter at an ad agency. She was finally earning her own money. The job kept her busy, but she liked it. Having control of her time felt amazing, especially after living with her family for so long. As she stared at the phone, unsure if she should call back, Janet thought about past Christmases. They were supposed to be fun, but for her, they never were. While the adults laughed and drank wine, she always had to look after her younger cousins. Over time, it stopped feeling like a choice and became something everyone just expected from her, without asking how she felt. She put down her coffee, took a deep breath, and answered the phone. "You finally answered," her mom, Maria, said with a slightly annoyed tone. "I called you several times." "I was at work, Mom," Janet said. In truth, work had ended a while ago. She just didn't want to talk yet. "What are your plans for Christmas?" her mom asked. Her voice had that familiar, sneaky tone. Janet felt tired already. The usual. Planning to come home, like always. "Well, this year is going to be a little different." "What do you mean?" Janet asked, frowning. Aunt Joyce had a great idea. All the adults are going on a Cayman Islands cruise from Christmas to New Year's. Isn't that exciting? Even though her mom said all the adults, Janet could tell she wasn't included. "What about me?" she asked. "Oh, about that," Maria said, pausing. "You have a different, important job," her mom said. Janet's stomach tightened. "What job?" "Taking care of Lauren, David, and Ryan. They're too young to come on the cruise." "Wait," Janet said, shocked. "You want me to watch a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 5-year-old for a whole week while everyone else relaxes on a beach and drinks cocktails?" "Don't say it like that. You get along with the kids, and you don't have Christmas plans, right? Plus, you don't have kids of your own yet. This could be good experience." Janet felt a wave of anger. "Mom, I have my own life. I made plans with friends, and I also have work to do. But it's for the family. And the cruise tickets are already paid for. They can't be changed." Janet tried to stay calm and not hang up. "When were you planning to ask me? Or did you just assume I'd say yes?" "Of course, I thought you'd say yes. You've always been the good one, always helping the family." "I'm not a kid anymore, Mom," Janet said in a calm voice. "I can decide how I spend my time. And I'm saying no." There was silence on the line. "Janet, don't just think about yourself. This is supposed to be a special vacation for the whole family." "Except me," Janet replied sharply. "You're calling me selfish, but you made these plans without asking me and just expected me to give up my week. That's selfish." "That's enough," her mom snapped. "I'll get your father to call. He'll talk some sense into you." Before the call ended, Janet said firmly, "If you expect me to babysit, I'm not coming home for Christmas." She wasn't sure if her mom even heard her. That night, Janet felt restless in her apartment. Her phone rang again, and again calls from her parents. She ignored them and sent every call to voicemail. There was also a short text from her Uncle Paul. "Janet, won't you think about the family?" She rolled her eyes. In her family, thinking about the family always meant giving up her own needs to make everyone else happy. Sitting on the couch, she called her friend Emma. "They're trying to make you babysit again?" Emma asked right away. "This time it's different," Janet said. "I told them no. I don't have to go along with everything they decide." "Good for you," Emma said. "You've always done too much for them. You deserve to have your own time." Janet sighed. "My dad won't stop calling." "Don't pick up," Emma said. "You've already made your decision. They're just trying to change your mind." "Thank you," Janet said, feeling a little better. "I'm not wrong, right?" Janet asked. "Definitely not," Emma replied. "You're an adult. You have the right to make your own choices, and people should respect that." After hanging up, Janet bravely answered a call from her dad. Dad, my answer is still no, she said right away. Janet, her father said calmly, we just want you to care about the family. You think I don't care? You're the ones ignoring my plans and my time. Okay, her dad replied, let's spend this year apart then. But, could you come just for Christmas morning? The kids really want to see you. Janet wasn't sure, but the request sounded fair. All right, she said. I'll come for Christmas morning, but only that. And please, stop asking me to babysit. I promise. Thank you, Janet. After the call, Janet felt a little uneasy. Her dad had agreed too quickly. It didn't feel normal. Still, she was glad she had spoken up and set clear boundaries. Over the next few weeks, Janet barely heard from her family. Just a few short texts. No one mentioned babysitting again. She felt relieved, but a small part of her stayed suspicious. On Christmas Eve, before going to bed, she sent a message to her parents. I'll be there around 12 tomorrow morning. Merry Christmas. The reply came quickly from her mom. Understood, Janet. Looking forward to seeing you. Janet smiled. Her relationship with her family had been messy for a long time, but she hoped this Christmas could be peaceful. She wanted to reconnect, but only on her own terms. The next morning, Janet woke up early. She wrapped the gifts with care and placed them in her car. She had picked each one with love: a set of books for Lauren, a Lego set for David, and a stuffed animal for little Ryan. As she drove, Christmas music played on the radio. She hummed along, feeling calm. It'll be a nice visit, she thought. Say hello, give the gifts, and then head home to enjoy my day. But when she pulled up to her parents' house, something didn't feel right. There were no cars in the driveway, not her parents', not Aunt Joyce's, not Uncle Paul's. The lights were on, but the house didn't have its usual holiday energy. Janet frowned, holding the presents as she walked to the door.
The doorbell rang.
Small footsteps ran toward it. Lauren opened the door with a big smile. Janet, you came? Of course I did, Janet said, hugging her. Merry Christmas, Lauren. But where is everyone? Oh, they left, Lauren said cheerfully. Mom, Dad, and the others went on a trip. Janet's heart sank. You were going to take care of us, right? Janet stood frozen in place. What did you say? Janet asked, stunned. David and Ryan ran up and hugged her. Did you bring presents? Janet forced a smile. Inside, she was shaking with anger. Yes, of course. Let's take them to the living room first. As she walked the kids in, she looked around. The house was nicely decorated. There were presents under the Christmas tree, and breakfast leftovers still sat on the table. Then she saw a note. While the kids excitedly opened their gifts, Janet picked it up and read. To Janet, we left on the 10 a.m. flight. We made breakfast for the kids. There's a week's worth of meals in the fridge. Please follow the instructions. Emergency contact numbers are also on the fridge. Put Ryan to bed by 8 p.m. Lauren and David should go to bed at 9:30 p.m. Love, Mom. Janet stared at the note. Her parents had ignored her no and tricked her into babysitting. The kids were laughing and cheering, happy with their presents. Janet knew this wasn't their fault. Her anger was for the adults, her parents and her aunt and uncle. I need to make a quick call, okay? I'll be right back, she told them. She went into the kitchen and called her mom's cell. After a few rings, her mom picked up. Oh, Janet. You made it. How are the kids? What were you thinking? Janet snapped. How could you do this after I clearly said no? Calm down, Maria said in a soft voice. We knew you'd show up. You're responsible. I'm not your babysitter, Janet said sharply. I said I'd come for Christmas morning. I never agreed to stay a whole week. But you're already there, her mom replied. You can't leave now. The kids are counting on you. This is child neglect, Janet said coldly. Do you know what would happen if I called the police? There was a gasp on the other end. You wouldn't, would you? Try me, Janet said. If you're not back soon, my next call will be to the police. Wait, Maria said, panicking. We're still at the airport. The flight hasn't left yet. Then cancel it and come back. I'm staying here for 1 more hour. If you're not back by then, I'm taking the kids to the police station. Janet, please. 1 hour. Janet said again and hung up. Her heart was racing. She walked back into the living room, trying to stay calm. Hey, everyone, she said with a smile. Your parents will be back soon. Let's have some fun while we wait. The kids cheered. Janet played board games with them, read Christmas stories, and shared some cookies. She kept her anger hidden from them. 65 minutes had passed since she gave her warning. Janet was thinking about whether she really needed to call the police. But in the end, it wasn't necessary. 60 minutes later, she heard cars pulling up outside. Looking out the window, she saw her parents' car, along with Aunt Joyce's and Uncle Paul's. Look, everyone's back, the kids shouted and ran to the door. Janet picked up her bag and stood silently as the children happily greeted the adults. Janet, her mom, Maria, said as she walked toward her. I don't need an explanation, Janet said firmly. I'm leaving. But it's Christmas, Maria begged. Can't we spend it together as a family? Family? Janet shook her head. Now I see how you really see me, just someone you can use when it's convenient. Don't ever treat me like that again. She turned to the kids. Goodbye, she said gently, then walked quietly out the back door. Before getting in her car, she paused. From inside, she could hear loud voices. Her dad, Brian, was yelling at Maria and Joyce. Janet took a deep breath and drove away. Her heart was full of anger and sadness, but also something new, freedom. She had finally stood up for herself. The next morning, Janet stayed home in her apartment. It was quiet. She answered messages from her friends, but ignored all messages from her family. After everything that happened, she needed space. Later in the afternoon, while scrolling through Twitter, she saw something that made her blood boil. Her mother had posted, "It was a sad Christmas. It hurts when someone doesn't care about their own family. The kids were disappointed, and everything we planned was ruined. I never thought our family bond could be so weak." There were many comments under the post. What a shame, Maria. The younger generation has no responsibility. Some people don't even think of the children. Family should come first. It's sad when others don't see that. Janet's hands shook. Her mom hadn't used her name, but everyone could tell the post was about her, and it completely twisted the truth. Furious, Janet took screenshots. Then, she opened her own Twitter page and began to type. It's time to tell the truth. Yesterday, I visited my family home for Christmas. But when I arrived, my parents, aunt, and uncle had already left for vacation, without telling me. They expected me to take care of 3 kids for a whole week, even though I had clearly said no. When I found out, I threatened to report them for child neglect. Only then did they come back. Now I'm being blamed for not caring about my family. But the truth is, they don't respect my time or my choices. I'm not their toy or a free babysitter they can use whenever they want, Janet wrote. Family should be about respect. It's not real family if it's all about demands and guilt. She knew posting this might seriously hurt her relationship with her family, but she felt like she had to be honest. With shaking hands, she hit post. The reactions came quickly. Her friend Emma was the first to comment. You did the right thing. Then more messages of support came from her friends. To Janet's surprise, some family members replied too. The first message came from her grandfather, Jacob. Janet, can you call me? We need to talk. Then her grandmother, Christina, commented publicly. Maria, Brian, Joyce, Paul, I'm disappointed in all of you. You owe Janet an apology. Knowing her grandparents were on her side gave Janet some comfort. She called her grandfather right away. Janet, he said kindly, that must have been really hard. Yes, Grandpa. It was awful. I spoke to Maria. What she did and what Brian, Joyce, and Paul did was wrong. But now everyone's blaming me, Janet said. Like I'm the bad one. They're wrong, her grandfather said firmly. You were just standing up for yourself. And what they did wasn't fair to the children either. I don't know what to do now. Keep some distance for now, he advised. They need time to think. Your grandma, and I will talk to them. Janet thanked him and ended the call. She felt a little better, but her peace didn't last long. That night, her social media filled with angry comments from her family. Her mom, Maria, said she was wrong for sharing private family matters online. Her dad, Brian, told her to grow up. Joyce and Paul said she had betrayed the family. Then more comments came in, cousins, aunts, and uncles blaming her. At the same time, something unexpected happened. Janet's post began to spread far beyond her own page. Friends of friends shared it. Strangers commented, saying they had gone through the same thing. Just because they're family doesn't mean you have to accept being treated badly. You did the right thing standing up for yourself. The support poured in. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages, likes, and shares. Finally, overwhelmed, she turned off her phone and went to sleep. The next morning, she was woken by a call from Emma. "Janet, your post has gone viral. People are sharing it everywhere. Some blogs have even written about it." "What?" Janet rubbed her eyes and quickly turned on her phone. Notifications flooded in. Her post had been shared thousands of times. People from all over were leaving comments, telling their own stories about setting boundaries with family. Some news websites had picked up the story, writing about toxic family expectations and the importance of respecting personal boundaries. Janet had never planned for any of this to happen. She had only wanted to speak her truth. But now, her story had spread far beyond what she ever imagined, and she wasn't sure what would come next. "I didn't plan for this to happen," Janet said. "But a lot of people understand you," Emma replied. "What you went through is something many people have been quietly dealing with for years." That afternoon, something surprising happened. Janet's mother, Maria, made a new post online. "I want to clear things up. My last post was emotional. My husband, my brother-in-law, and I expected too much from our daughter, Janet. We didn't respect her wishes and tried to treat her like a free babysitter. Her reaction was completely fair. I'm truly sorry." Janet stared at the post in shock. Her mother apologizing publicly? That was something she never thought she'd see. Soon, she got a text from her grandfather. "I spoke with Maria. Their behavior was shameful. Your parents, Aunt Joyce, and Uncle Paul have all agreed to apologize publicly. But honestly, I don't think that's enough. They've taken advantage of you for a long time. We should consider taking legal action." Janet paused. Legal action? That felt like too much at first. But later that night, she checked her email, and everything changed. It was from her father. "Janet, we have apologized publicly. But you also need to think about your behavior. Threatening to call the police for child neglect was too extreme. We only wanted you to watch the kids for a few days. Your reaction has embarrassed the whole family. Because of this, you're no longer welcome at family gatherings." Dad. After reading the email, Janet felt a wave of rage. The apology had been fake. They were still blaming her, and now they were trying to shut her out completely. She called her grandfather right away. "Grandpa, Dad just sent me this email." Her grandfather was furious. "That's completely unacceptable. They've learned nothing. Janet, I think it's time you spoke to a lawyer. This is turning into harassment." Feeling supported, Janet made an appointment with a family lawyer the next day. The lawyer, Laura Marano, listened carefully as Janet told her everything. "Miss Varney," she said seriously, "this isn't just a simple family argument. What your parents, aunt, and uncle did could be seen as psychological harassment. And the things they posted about you online might even be considered defamation, possibly even libel." "Can I really sue them?" Janet asked. "Let's start by sending a warning letter," the lawyer said. "We'll let them know that if they don't stop the harassment, we'll take legal action." Janet agreed. The lawyer then sent a formal warning to her parents, Aunt Joyce, and Uncle Paul. But instead of stopping, things got worse. Maria posted online that Janet was an ungrateful daughter trying to sue her own family. Brian called Janet emotionally unstable and said she was making everything up. Joyce and Paul also joined in, saying Janet just wanted attention and had completely lied about the situation. That was the final straw for Janet. She went back to her lawyer and decided to file a lawsuit for defamation and emotional distress. "Miss Varney, I know this isn't an easy choice," said attorney Laura Marano gently, but it's necessary to protect you." When the lawsuit was officially filed, Janet felt a mix of emotions. She still loved her family, but what they had done couldn't be ignored. This wasn't just one bad moment. It was part of a long pattern of using her and not respecting her boundaries. Her grandparents fully supported her. They even offered to speak in court on her behalf. Lauren, David, and Ryan were still too young to understand everything, but Janet stayed in touch with them.
She wanted them to know she still cared.
The legal case took months. During that time, her family completely fell apart. Her parents, Aunt Joyce, and Uncle Paul stopped all contact. Other family members took sides. Many stood by her parents for the sake of family unity, but a few cousins and her grandparents supported Janet. The trial moved faster than expected. Janet's lawyer explained everything clearly: the pattern of mistreatment, the Christmas situation, and the social media attacks afterward. The strongest part of the case was the testimony from her grandparents, who spoke about how Janet had always been treated unfairly in the family. But the most powerful evidence was the screenshots, social media posts from Maria, Brian, Joyce, and Paul, plus the cruel messages they had sent to Janet. It clearly showed a pattern of harassment. In the end, the judge agreed with Janet. He gave her a restraining order against her parents and her aunt and uncle. They were also ordered to pay her for the emotional harm they caused and for spreading lies online. On top of that, the judge ordered them to take down the false posts and write a public apology. The actions of Maria Varney, Brian Varney, Joyce Mitchell, and Paul Mitchell clearly show harassment and caused serious emotional harm to Janet Varney. The judge said firmly, "Family should be built on mutual respect." The behavior of the defendants broke that important rule. As Janet walked out of the courtroom, her emotions were all over the place. She had won. She stood up for herself and protected her boundaries. But she also felt sadness. She might have lost part of her family forever. "You did the right thing," her grandfather said, hugging her gently. "Time might heal some things, but never forget, you have the right to protect your worth and your dignity." A few weeks after the court ruling, the lives of Janet's parents and her aunt and uncle changed completely. News of the trial had spread in the media, and their reputations were badly hurt. Brian lost the trust of his coworkers and had to retire early from the company where he had worked for 37 years. Maria was asked to leave her position in the PDA and lost her standing in the local community. The couple became isolated and no longer lived the comfortable life they once had. Joyce and Paul, who owned a small shop, also suffered. Their reputation took a hit, and their regular customers stopped coming. Business dropped so badly that within 7 months, they had to close the store. They couldn't keep up with their bills and ended up moving into a smaller apartment in the suburbs. Janet kept in touch only with her grandparents and the children. She had no contact at all with her parents or her aunt and uncle. When Lauren turned 19, she moved out of her parents' house and went to live with Janet. Over time, David and Ryan also grew distant from their parents. Since Janet's departure, they had mostly been left with hired babysitters. 12 years later, Janet had built a new life. She had a successful career and was surrounded by people who truly cared about her, her husband, her daughter, and close friends she chose herself. She had finally found peace and freedom after stepping away from the family that once treated her like she didn't matter. Sometimes, the pain of the past would still come back. But whenever it did, she reminded herself, "I have no space in my life for people who treated me like a tool." She once said this to her therapist. "It might sound cold," she added, "but I had to protect myself." The wounds her family left behind never fully healed, but Janet walked forward with strength and pride. The downfall of her parents, Joyce and Paul, stood as a strong reminder. Those who use and mistreat others will one day face the consequences. My relationship with my family became even weaker after I moved out and bought my own house. When they saw the house, they took legal action, demanding I give it to my sister. They lost the case and ended up owing $15,000. I've been thinking about this for a long time, wondering if I need advice or just want to share my feelings. I've always felt unloved by my family. I have a sister, Amy, who is 6 years younger than me. We've never gotten along. When she was born, it felt like everything got worse. My parents seemed to focus all their attention on her. She was the golden child, and I was treated like I didn't matter. Maybe I'm overreacting, but looking back, things were clearly unfair. Take last Christmas, for example. Amy got a brand new PS5, something I had wanted for a long time. Meanwhile, my only gift was a pair of plain white socks from Walmart. It's not about the socks themselves, it's the fact that they were the only gift I got. While everyone else was happy and celebrating, Amy was tearing through her many gifts like it was her personal holiday. The house was filled with excitement for her, and I just sat there, trying to smile in my new socks, completely ignored. Sadly, this kind of thing isn't unusual. It's how my whole life has been. My family doesn't even remember my birthday. The last time they celebrated it was when I turned 11. Since then, it's been forgotten. Last year, I quietly celebrated with my college friends because I didn't get a single call, message, or email from my parents. On the other hand, Amy's birthdays are a huge deal. For her 17th birthday, my parents threw a big party with family and friends, hired entertainers and magicians, set up a trampoline, and had professional catering. The house was completely decorated. It felt more like a festival than a birthday. I wasn't even invited to Amy's birthday party. I only found out the day before when I asked my parents about it. They clearly told me they didn't want me there. At the time, I was busy with my studies, so I decided to spend the day with friends to distract myself. Still, even when I was with my family, I felt like I didn't belong. The loneliness was hard to ignore. When my birthday came around this year, I had a small bit of hope that maybe things would be different. I wasn't expecting much, but I thought they might at least remember me. Nothing changed. I spent the day with my college friends again. They threw a small, fun party in the dorm, which was nice, but it wasn't the same as celebrating with family. Birthdays, even small ones, are special when spent with family. Amy's birthdays always remind me of what I'm missing. I remember her 11th birthday when my parents decorated the whole house with a pirate theme. For my own 11th birthday, I was just happy to have pizza. It's not about the gifts or the parties. It's about feeling like I matter. I've always worked hard, kept up good grades, and stayed out of trouble, but it felt like none of that mattered. Amy is different from me. She's outgoing, great at sports, and always the center of attention. My parents were so happy when she was born. I remember being excited too. I imagined we'd be close, playing games and being best friends like in the movies. But it didn't turn out that way. Amy wasn't interested in spending time with me. She preferred being with her friends and doing things that made her stand out. As I grew older, I started to feel resentment toward her. At first, I told myself it wasn't her fault, but I began to notice how she used her influence. My parents never blamed her for anything. If something went wrong, I was the one who got in trouble. One time, Amy broke the TV when her friends were over. Somehow, it fell off the stand and nearly shattered. When my parents came home, Amy pointed at me and said it was my fault. They believed her and didn't even question it. It was just another reminder of how little I mattered in their eyes. I wasn't even home when the TV broke, but my parents believed Amy and punished me instead. I was grounded for a month, and they took away my phone. They treated me like a criminal. After that, I withdrew from my family. I spent most of my time in my room or at friends' houses. I desperately wanted to leave home, but every time I returned, I felt more and more invisible. My room was small and felt suffocating. It was nothing like Amy's, which was filled with the latest gadgets and decorated with posters of her favorite sports teams. Her room felt like her own little kingdom, while mine was just a shadowy corner of the house. My 19th birthday was especially painful. I had hoped it might be a fresh start now that I was an adult, but I was wrong. The day began like any other. My mom was busy in the kitchen, my dad was buried in the newspaper, and Amy was playing on her new Xbox. Nobody said happy birthday. There were no gifts, no acknowledgement, nothing. I felt completely ignored. In that moment, I realized nothing would ever change. Amy was always the center of attention, and I was left out. Whether she knew it or not, her actions made me resent her even more. I decided I needed to take control of my life. I distanced myself from my parents and avoided being around Amy's obvious favoritism. Being ignored by my family was emotionally draining, so I cut contact as much as possible. As soon as I could, I moved out and started living with friends from university. The move felt like a huge relief, like I was finally free. To support myself, I started freelancing in graphic design. At first, it was just to make ends meet, but over time, I built a reputation for my work. I got more clients, received great feedback, and worked on bigger projects. I put in long hours, often staying up late and working on weekends, determined to succeed on my own. By the time I was 25, my hard work paid off, and my life took a positive turn. I met someone named Jerry, and he was everything I had been looking for in a partner. He was smart, ambitious, and kind-hearted. Jerry was also a freelancer, managing social media for small and medium businesses. We hit it off immediately and began working on projects together. We supported each other and grew in our careers. For the first time, I felt truly valued and cared for. I wasn't just someone in the background to Jerry. He truly understood me and loved me for who I was, not for what I could do for him. His care came from genuine feelings, not out of obligation. As our careers became more stable, we started dreaming of a bigger future together. After a year of dating, we decided to move in together. Everything was going well, and we made a bold plan to use our savings to buy a home. We didn't want just any house. We wanted something special. After a long search, we found a beautiful 4-story house in the suburbs. It was more expensive than we had planned, but with our combined income, we managed to afford it. It truly felt like our dream home, a result of our teamwork and hard work. We signed the papers and became the official owners. 4 days later, the trouble started. I got a call from my family. At first, I didn't want to answer it. Since moving out, I had barely spoken to them, and every conversation felt awkward. But the calls didn't stop, so I finally picked up. They said, "We're in town and want to visit your new home." I wasn't sure how to feel, but decided to let them come, thinking it was better to get it over with than avoid them forever. A few hours later, my parents, Amy, and a man I didn't recognize showed up at the door. That's when things got weird. Amy introduced the man as her fiancé, Douglas, and also revealed she was pregnant. I was shocked. I didn't even know she was engaged, let alone expecting a baby. It felt like a wake-up call about how distant I had become from my family. Before they even stepped inside, my dad made a snarky comment. "So, this is the house you bought? I didn't think you could afford something like this." His tone was condescending, but I chose to ignore it. I wasn't in the mood to argue. Once inside, the atmosphere became even more awkward. My mom tried making small talk with Jerry, but he quickly picked up on the tension and glanced at me, clearly sensing something was wrong. Meanwhile, my dad and Amy were whispering to each other, and Douglas was walking around like the house was his. Then, out of nowhere, my dad spoke up in a firm and unexpected way, making the situation even stranger. My father said arrogantly, "I think it makes sense for Amy and Douglas to move in here to build their family and make room for the baby." I was so shocked I couldn't even speak. He went on, ignoring how upset I was. "This house is too big for you and Jerry. Amy and Douglas really need a place like this to raise a child. You two don't need all this space." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then he looked me in the eye and said something that made my blood boil. "This is no joke. It's time for you to step aside. You should give up what your sister needs. Family comes first, and she's starting a new family. You and Jerry can find a smaller place. This house is more suitable for them." I felt devastated. Years of bottled-up resentment poured out. "This home belongs to Jerry and me. We bought it, and it's in our names. No one gets to make decisions for us." Amy smirked and added, "Wait a minute. Why do you even need such a big house? Unlike you, we have a baby on the way." That was the last straw. I snapped. "The issue isn't the size of the house. The problem is that you're trying to take something that's mine and claim it as your own." My voice was shaking with anger. "I've put up with this kind of treatment my whole life, and I'm done with it." My father suddenly became aggressive. He stood up, puffed out his chest, and said, "You should be grateful. It's shameful to live in a house that's beyond your means. If you give it to Amy, she won't have to feel that way. Besides, they're not demanding the keys, they're just asking. Whether you like it or not, this house becoming Amy's is inevitable." That was it. I couldn't hold back anymore. I exploded with rage, lunging at him and pinning him against the wall. "Get out of this house right now," I shouted. Jerry tried to calm me down, but I couldn't stop. Years of frustration and anger were pouring out. My father pushed back, and before I knew it, we were yelling and physically fighting. My mother and Amy were screaming, and Douglas stood in the corner frantically, making a phone call. The chaos didn't stop until the police arrived. It was Douglas who had called them. The situation spiraled out of control, and the police had to separate us. They handcuffed both my father and me and took us to the police car. I never thought things would come to this. I never expected my father to try and take my home from me. And now, it had ended in a way I could never have imagined. I ended up in jail, but Jerry came and paid my bail hours later. Even though I was free, the damage was done, my family was completely broken. But things weren't over yet. They got worse. My father decided to sue me for the house, claiming that Amy and Douglas needed it more than I did. He actually took me to court, demanding I hand over the house. I was shocked by how far he was willing to go. I hired a lawyer and gathered every document proving the house was mine. I prepared for what felt like the biggest battle of my life. But I had more to bring to court than just paperwork. Over the years, I had endured emotional and psychological abuse from my family, and I decided it was time to speak up. I collected evidence, emails, text messages, and even testimonies from friends who had seen how my parents treated me. When the trial began, my lawyer not only argued that the house was legally mine, but also highlighted the neglect and emotional abuse I had suffered. My father tried to make himself look like a caring parent, saying he was only trying to do what was best for the family. Amy and Douglas acted like victims, claiming they needed the house for their baby and calling me selfish for not giving it up. But their story didn't hold up. After months of hearings, the verdict was finally announced. The court ruled in my favor, confirming the house was legally mine. On top of that, the judge ordered my father to pay $150,000 in damages for the years of emotional abuse. For the first time in my life, I felt like justice had been served. Someone had finally stood up for me. After the trial, I made the decision to cut off all contact with my parents and Amy. I couldn't take the manipulation, lies, and favoritism anymore. Together with Jerry, I started a new chapter. We made the house truly ours and began building the life we wanted. Though the scars from the past hadn't completely healed, I felt a sense of peace I had never known before. Now, for years have passed since all of this happened. Looking back, it's still hard to believe how much my parents tried to deceive and manipulate me, but that was my reality. Amy had once been the favored child, but things have changed. Before I go on, I want to tell you about our wedding, which happened 4 years ago. It was the happiest day of my life and the best decision I've ever made. After everything I went through with my family, Jerry stood by me through it all. The court battle confirmed what I already knew. Jerry was the one person I could truly rely on. I could truly trust Jerry. We had a small, simple wedding with just his close friends and family. I didn't invite my parents, sister, or any of my family members. After everything they had put me through, the manipulation, abuse, and even suing me, I didn't want their toxic behavior to ruin my special day. By then, I had fully come to terms with their true nature. A few days after the wedding, I got a long email from my mother. It was full of guilt-tripping, saying how hurt she was about not being invited. I don't even know how she found out about the wedding. My father didn't contact me at all, which I was fine with. But Amy? She completely lost her composure, which wasn't surprising. Amy had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She never took responsibility for her mistakes and always blamed others. Even though the court ruling and the $150,000 payment affected my parents financially, they weren't completely ruined. But their finances took a big hit, and they couldn't live as comfortably as before. Amy, who had been spoiled her entire life, couldn't handle this new reality. She believed she had a right to inherit my father's house, but that wasn't going to happen. She started demanding large sums of money, but those demands went unmet. Her life began to fall apart. A few months after the trial, her fiancé Douglas left her. Not long after that, Amy reportedly had a miscarriage due to the stress she was under. Somehow, it all felt like it was being blamed on me. My father losing the lawsuit, the financial troubles, and even Douglas leaving Amy. It seemed like everything was being pinned on me. Then, everything took a shocking turn. About a month into my marriage, Jerry and I were settling into our new life and enjoying the peace of being free from family drama. One day, we decided to go for a walk in the neighborhood. The air was crisp and the streets were quiet.
It was supposed to be a relaxing day.
As we walked, we suddenly saw Amy standing on a corner, staring at me with pure anger in her eyes. My heart dropped. I hadn't seen her since the trial, and I couldn't understand why she was there. Confused, I yelled, "What are you doing here?" Before I could process what was happening, she charged at me. In her hand was an iron rod, probably taken from a nearby construction site. I screamed and tried to back away, but she was too fast. She swung the rod and hit me in the abdomen. Before I could react, pain shot through me like fire burning through my ribs. I bent over, gasping for air, but Amy wasn't finished. She swung the rod again, this time hitting my left shin. The sickening sound of the impact was followed by me collapsing onto the sidewalk. "You ruined my life," Amy screamed, trembling with rage. "It's all your fault. You caused Dad's financial collapse, you made Douglas leave, and you broke everything." I tried to get up and defend myself, but my body wouldn't cooperate. My strength was gone, and I couldn't move properly. The world around me became a blur, but I could hear voices getting louder and footsteps rushing toward us. Someone grabbed Amy and pulled her away, but I was too weak to understand what was happening. My consciousness faded. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Jerry was sitting beside me, his face pale and his eyes filled with tears. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and every part of my body ached. "Are you okay?" Jerry whispered, gripping my hand tightly. "I'm okay," I managed to say, but I wasn't. I had multiple broken ribs, a fractured left leg, and a broken right arm. The doctor told me I was lucky to be alive. If bystanders hadn't stepped in when they did, Amy might have killed me. The police were called, and Amy was arrested on the spot while I lay bleeding on the sidewalk. After that, I drifted in and out of consciousness, heavily sedated by pain medication. As my body began to heal, Jerry stayed by my side the entire time. He handled everything: police reports, insurance claims, and hiring a lawyer to prepare for the upcoming trial. Amy was facing serious charges, including assault with a deadly weapon. Because of the severity of my injuries, she was looking at a long prison sentence. When I was finally awake and able to understand everything, Jerry explained what had happened. Amy, after being abandoned by Douglas, had a complete mental breakdown. She fell into deep depression and refused to accept responsibility for her situation. Instead, she blamed everything on me. According to the police report, Amy had waited outside my house for hours and grabbed the iron rod from a nearby construction site to attack me. When questioned by the police, she showed no regret. She justified her actions by claiming that I had destroyed her life and said she was only seeking justice. She truly believed she was in the right. Amy believed I was the cause of all her problems, her fiancé leaving, and our father's financial troubles. I spent a long and painful time in the hospital recovering from my injuries. Every day was tough, with constant physical therapy, medical checkups, and the looming stress of the trial. I couldn't walk for long periods, and even after being discharged, I had to use crutches and arm support. The doctors warned me that it could take months to recover fully, and there was a chance I might never regain all my strength. After months of treatment and recovery, the trial against Amy finally began. She pleaded not guilty, holding on to the belief that her actions were justified. She insisted that I was to blame for everything that led her to act the way she did. Her defense argued that her mental state was fragile due to family issues, but the evidence against her was strong. Eyewitnesses testified that they saw Amy attack me and immediately called the police. Medical reports detailed the severity of my injuries, and police evidence showed that her attack was planned. She had waited outside my house and brought the iron rod with her to harm me. It was clear this wasn't a random act of frustration, but an intentional act of violence. Sitting in court and listening to my sister try to justify her actions was more painful than anything I'd been through before. She never once looked at me. To her, it was as if I didn't exist anymore. The worst part was seeing my parents in the courtroom. Not only were they there, but they sat on Amy's side. Every time she claimed I had ruined her life, they nodded in agreement. Their silent support for her felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Despite everything, they chose her side, still believing she was the victim. The trial lasted several weeks, but the outcome seemed clear from the start. With the evidence and testimonies presented, the verdict was almost inevitable. Amy was found guilty of serious assault and sentenced to 6 years in prison, with a possibility of parole in 4 years. By that point, her sentence didn't matter much to me. I had already accepted that I no longer had a family. Through this experience, I realized that those who were supposed to love and support me weren't true family at all. The one constant in my life was Jerry. He stood by me through everything, never wavering. He faced every difficult situation with strength and was always there to support me. Together, we've focused on moving forward, leaving the pain of the past behind, and building a positive future. I am slowly recovering, both physically and mentally, and I'm beginning to see a brighter future ahead. I go to therapy regularly to help me work through the trauma of what happened, but it's a slow and long process. Some days I feel good about my progress and can appreciate how far I've come. Other days are harder, and it's tough to look in the mirror because I feel so different from the person I used to be. I don't know what the future holds, but I've decided to take each day as it comes and make the most of it. One thing I'm sure of now is who I can truly trust. My name is Betty. I'm 27 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've felt left out and unwanted in my family. It's been really hard, especially when I compare it to how my younger sister, Laura, has always been treated. She's 5 years younger than me, and our parents have always given her all their love and attention. They spoiled her, praised everything she did, and stood by her no matter what. If she had even a small problem, they would rush to help her and make things easier. But when it came to me, they hardly noticed my efforts or achievements. One day, our parents were getting ready to go to the park. My mom was busy packing and my dad was looking for his car keys. Laura, as usual, was full of energy and telling them to hurry up. I wanted to go too, so I walked over to my mom and quietly said, "I want to come along too." She barely looked at me and replied coldly, "Betty, you should stay home and do your homework." Her words hurt me deeply. My dad didn't say anything, and Laura happily ran out the door, saying, "See you later." I stayed behind, alone in the living room, sitting on the couch and staring out the window. The house felt so quiet, except for the ticking clock. Growing up, I was often left out like this. My parents didn't include me in family outings. They only told me to focus on schoolwork. Sometimes, Laura would come to me with a smile and ask if I wanted to play, but even then, I felt like I didn't really belong. Whenever I was doing something, Laura would always want to join me. She'd happily say, "Me too," and it felt normal to have her around. But as she got older, she started to notice how her parents treated her differently. They gave her lots of love and praise, even for small things. But when it came to me, they didn't seem to care. They didn't show interest in what I was doing or how I felt. Laura began to see this difference, and over time, she started acting like she was better than me. The sweet little sister I used to know became more distant and ruder. She would brush off my conversations and even laugh when I failed at something. Around our parents, she acted like the perfect, well-behaved child, but her attitude toward me became colder and meaner. I started to feel more and more alone, like I didn't belong in my own family. After I finished high school, I got a job as a waitress at a local restaurant. I was nervous at first, but slowly I got used to it and even started to enjoy it. Sadly, my family didn't see my job as something to be proud of. My mom would make hurtful comments like, "Is this the only job you can get?" She never really listened when I tried to share stories from work. Laura wasn't much better. She'd say things like, "Being a waitress is a respectable job," but I could tell she didn't really mean it. At family get-togethers, I often felt invisible. They acted like I wasn't even there. It hurt a lot, but deep down I still hoped they would notice me and care. When I was 21, I met Ryan through a friend. He seemed quiet and serious at first, but once we started talking more, I was drawn to how kind and caring he was. We became close very quickly, and soon we were dating. Spending time with him became the best part of my life. Later, we decided to move in together. My days started to feel special because of him. He made me feel safe and loved, and we shared a lot of fun outdoor adventures. As I built this new life with Ryan and focused on my job, I started to drift away from my parents and Laura. I didn't talk to them much anymore, and I was okay with that. Spending time with Ryan gave me a break from all the pain and emotional neglect I had felt growing up. He made me feel safe and cared for, something I never felt at home. One day, after being away for a long time, I decided to go to a family gathering. It brought up a lot of feelings I had tried to push away for years. I chatted politely with some relatives I hadn't seen in a while, but I quickly noticed that my parents and Laura still acted like I wasn't there. Then, out of nowhere, Laura stood up and announced loudly, "I'm getting married." I was shocked. She had never told me, and I had heard it at the same time as everyone else. My parents hadn't said anything either. It felt like a punch to the chest. No one had thought I was important enough to tell. The room filled with excitement and conversations about Laura's wedding.
Everyone was talking about it.
I sat there quietly, smiling to keep up appearances, but inside, I felt incredibly lonely and left out. As the wedding planning started, I felt even more distant from them. Since I had moved out, no one told me anything about the plans. I wanted to be part of it, so I sent Laura a message. "If there's anything I can help with, just let me know." She replied with just 2 cold words. "It's okay." That short message made me feel even more unwanted. A few days later, I was surprised when Laura called me. She said, "Betty, can I ask you something about the wedding dress?" I felt hopeful, thinking she was finally including me. But then she said something that left me speechless. "You're not invited to the ceremony." I was frozen. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Why would my own sister not invite me to her wedding? I managed to ask, "Why?" She paused for a moment, sighed, and said, "Because I don't want Kevin or his parents to know that you work as a waitress." Those words hit me hard. It felt like my heart broke in that moment. I had been left out just because of my job. My voice shook with hurt and disbelief, but all she said was, "That's just how it is. If you really cared about my happiness, you'd understand." I stood there, completely shocked. Laura didn't seem to understand how much her words had hurt me. It was like she had no idea how deeply I was wounded, more than she could ever imagine. "Have you ever even thought about how I feel? Can you think about me for once?" I asked. Laura's voice suddenly got louder. I was caught off guard and stayed quiet, knowing she cared more about her image than anything else. "Fine, I'll email you the details about the dress," she said, sounding cold and annoyed. Then she hung up without giving me a chance to say more. Right then, I felt a tightness in my chest. A storm of anger and sadness started building inside me. I never thought being left out of my sister's wedding could hurt this much. I decided to talk to our parents and explain everything. But when I called, my dad just laughed and said, "That must be a joke." My mom didn't believe me either. "Laura would never say something like that," she said, sounding surprised and dismissive. Their reactions broke my heart. They didn't believe a single word I said. That moment made it even clearer how distant I had become from my own family. I felt crushed by disappointment. I couldn't take their cold treatment anymore. I went home, back to where I felt safe, with Ryan. He was sitting on the couch and could immediately tell something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked gently. This time, I didn't pretend everything was fine. I told him everything about the wedding, the hurtful call with my parents, and how alone I had felt for so long. As I finished talking, I could feel tears starting to build. Ryan stayed quiet and listened carefully. After a moment, he sighed and said something I didn't expect. "There's something I need to tell you. I've actually been working as Laura's wedding planner." His words stunned me. I was shocked and unsure of how to feel. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. Ryan looked uncomfortable. "I knew you had pulled away from your family, and I didn't want to upset you. I thought staying quiet was best." I had mixed emotions. I appreciated that he was trying to protect me, but part of me wished he had been honest from the beginning. "But Laura asked me about the dress, didn't she?" I said, confused. Ryan sat beside me and gently put his arm around my shoulders. "Yes, she did. I think that shows she still depends on you in some way." His calm, caring words stayed with me. Even in all the pain, they gave me a small sense of comfort. I looked up at Ryan, thinking about what he said. "Maybe Laura will change her mind and invite you to the wedding," he said kindly. "If she really didn't care about you, she wouldn't have asked for your help with the dress, right?" Ryan gave me a gentle smile. His words made me feel a little warmer inside, but I was still unsure. Deep down, I didn't really believe Laura would invite me. Ryan stayed close, quietly supporting me as I continued to deal with all my mixed-up emotions. Even though I felt hurt and left out, I kept working on Laura's wedding dress. I had so many feelings inside: sadness, frustration, and a strong sense of being excluded. But I stayed focused and did my best. Working on the dress was the only thing I felt I could do. A small part of me still hoped she might change her mind. I followed Laura's instructions carefully, making sure everything, from the fabric to the design, was just right. I wanted the dress to be perfect, but the wedding invitation never came. Then the day of the rehearsal dinner arrived. The place was beautifully decorated, full of friends and family. Everyone seemed happy and excited. Kevin, Laura's fiancé, noticed I wasn't there. He and I had known each other since college. We weren't super close, but we had always gotten along, so it made sense he was curious about my absence. During a break, he went up to Laura and asked, "Hey, why isn't Betty here? She's your sister, right?" Laura paused for a moment, then smiled awkwardly and said, "She's just busy with work. It's nothing to worry about." Kevin looked confused and frowned a little. "But isn't it a bit strange that your sister isn't involved?" Laura seemed caught off guard. After a short pause, she said, "Maybe, but you're here, and that's what matters. Let's just enjoy the dinner." Kevin didn't look totally convinced, but he let it go and accepted her answer. After the dinner ended, something unexpected happened. I got a phone call from Laura. "Why did you tell Kevin?" she snapped, her voice full of anger. I was confused. "Tell him what?" I asked, truly not knowing what she meant. "You told him to ask me to invite you to the wedding, didn't you?" she accused. Her words cut deep. She sounded like I had betrayed her somehow. "No," I said quietly. "I didn't say anything like that," I replied. "Don't lie to me," Laura snapped. "Why else would Kevin say that? You must have made him ask me so you could get invited to the wedding." Her harsh words hit me hard. They hurt deeply. "I swear, I didn't say anything, Laura," I said, my voice shaky as I tried to defend myself. "Stop interfering with my wedding. It's none of your business." With that, she hung up. A few hours later, my phone rang again. This time it was my parents. When I answered, my mom's cold voice came through. "Betty, what were you thinking? Why are you getting involved in your sister's wedding? What do you want out of this?" I was shocked. "I didn't do anything. Kevin just asked a simple question. That's all," I tried to explain. But then my dad joined in, his voice stern and sharp. "Do you realize how much trouble you've caused Laura? This isn't okay." I felt anger and frustration building inside me. No one was listening. No one believed me. I had done nothing wrong, and yet I was being blamed for everything. "I don't want to say anything else," I finally said. It's clear that none of you believe me. Then I ended the call, my eyes filling with tears. Even though I was heartbroken by their words, I wasn't ready to just let it go. I was tired of being treated this way. Fueled by hurt and determination, I picked up my phone and called Ryan. Ryan, I said, please cancel the rental for Laura's wedding dress. There was a short silence as Ryan processed what I said, then he replied calmly and supportively. Okay, I understand. I'll stand by your decision. Later, Ryan told me that Laura was upset and didn't understand what was going on. On the day of the wedding, the dress never showed up. Guests at the venue were whispering and confused about what had happened. The ceremony continued, but the mood had clearly changed. After the wedding, Laura confronted Ryan in anger. Why did this happen? You were the planner. You ruined my big day. Despite everything, Laura and Kevin went on their honeymoon. But to my surprise, during the trip, I got a call from Kevin. He sounded confused and concerned. Betty, I need to ask you something. I've tried to talk to Laura about why you weren't at the wedding, but she keeps avoiding the topic. I'm honestly confused. None of it makes sense. I needed to know the truth, Kevin said over the phone. That's why I'm calling you. Even though we're still on our honeymoon. I could hear the worry and confusion in his voice. I took a deep breath and replied carefully. It's because Laura didn't want you or your parents to know I work as a waitress. She was afraid of how you might see me, especially since she didn't know we were friends. There was a long pause. Then Kevin said, sounding shocked, I can't believe Laura would think like that. After hearing the truth, Kevin quietly took it in, but it clearly changed something for him. Later, during their honeymoon, he made a sudden and serious decision. He told me he wanted to divorce Laura. When Laura came back from the honeymoon, she went to her old house and saw a for sale sign in the front yard. In a panic, she called me. What's going on? Why is the house being sold? I took a moment before answering calmly. Our parents asked me to let you stay there, but now that you're married, I thought you didn't need it anymore. So, I put it up for sale. There was silence on the other end. Then, with a shaky voice, Laura said, I'm getting divorced. I was stunned. Divorced? But you were just on your honeymoon. Kevin's call from during their trip flashed through my mind. This is your fault, Laura said suddenly. Her words hit hard.
I didn't know what to say.
The pain in her voice was real. Kevin found out you weren't invited to the wedding because I didn't want him to know you're a waitress. You must have told him everything, didn't you? She was angry, really angry. I stood there silently, overwhelmed by everything. It's all your fault. With a shaky voice, I finally replied, Laura, I never meant to hurt you. But when Kevin asked, I couldn't lie. I didn't think he'd end the marriage over it. Don't make excuses, she shouted. You should take responsibility. Then she hung up. A few days later, my phone rang again. It was our parents. I sighed, already dreading what they'd say. When I picked up, my mother's cold voice came through. What happened to Laura is truly sad. You started all this by telling Kevin, didn't you? What kind of sister does that? My father added, you always do this. You never think about how your actions affect the family. What were you trying to prove? That you could hurt Laura? Their words made me so angry I could hardly speak. You're never going to believe me, I snapped. You act like I'm the only one to blame, but you don't understand anything. There was a short silence before my mother sighed and said, you really have no compassion for your family. I couldn't help but let out a cold, bitter laugh. Me? Lacking compassion? Have you ever shown me any compassion? I said. There was silence on the other end. Then I continued, my voice firm and cold. We're not even a real family. I don't care what happens to Laura anymore. With that, I hung up the phone, sure of one thing, I was done. I didn't want anything to do with Laura anymore. But Laura didn't stop. She began attacking me on social media, posting every day and blaming me for her divorce. Her posts got worse each time. Soon, she wasn't just blaming me. She was insulting our whole family and even some of our friends. Then one day, while I was at work, Laura stormed into the store. She saw me and started yelling right away, scaring everyone around. "You ruined my life," she screamed, marching toward me. My coworkers froze in shock as she pointed at me and shouted, "You caused my divorce by telling Kevin." Her voice echoed across the store. I tried to stay calm and said, "Laura, please stop this." "Not here." But she didn't stop. She kept yelling, making everyone around uncomfortable. I had no choice. I called security to handle it. Later, she showed up at my house. She pushed past me and started breaking things. I grabbed my phone and started recording her behavior. She didn't stop there. She filled my mailbox with angry letters and wrote hateful words on my front door. Every morning, I'd wake up to graffiti calling me things like traitor and worse sister. The letters became more intense, with lines like, "You made me lose everything," and "I will never forgive you." At first, I tried to ignore it, but neighbors started to notice and asked, "Are you okay? That woman outside your house, is she bothering you?" It all became too much. I was exhausted and stressed out. I never thought Laura would go this far. Feeling like I had no other choice, I sat down with Ryan and we decided to take legal action. We contacted a lawyer and filed a case against her. Her actions, yelling in public, breaking into my home, sending threats, were clearly harassment and stalking. The evidence I had gathered was strong. It clearly showed all the ways Laura had harassed me. After several months, the court finally gave its decision. Laura was given a suspended sentence of 1 year, which meant she wouldn't go to jail unless she broke the rules. She also had to attend counseling, and the court gave me a restraining order, so she couldn't come near me again. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of relief. I finally had some peace and legal protection. But Laura didn't stop there. She filed a civil lawsuit against me, claiming that I had hurt her and should pay her money. I spoke to my lawyer again and decided to offer a settlement to avoid a long and stressful court fight. Eventually, after pressure from our parents, Laura agreed to settle. They told her, "There's no point in dragging this out. It's better to walk away now." Even then, Laura wasn't happy. She muttered, "It's all her fault," still blaming me. After the case ended and with the restraining order in place, I slowly started to feel normal again. Whenever I felt anxious, Ryan was always there for me, comforting and supporting me. The pain from everything that had happened didn't disappear completely, but I no longer felt afraid. With Ryan by my side, I could live my life in peace. We moved to a new city, leaving behind my family and all the painful memories. It was a fresh start. Every morning, Ryan and I would sit together, drink coffee, and talk about our plans for the day. Those small, simple moments became the happiest part of my life. "Let's keep moving forward together," Ryan would say softly, holding my hand. His touch warmed my heart and helped heal the pain that still lingered. Though the past still left some shadows, I wasn't alone anymore. With Ryan beside me, I found the strength to face the future. I took a deep breath, looked ahead, and was ready to welcome whatever came next.